The Imperial Japanese Navy, IJN, submarine I-58 holds a unique place in the annals of naval history, not only for its military achievements but for the profound impact it had on both the Japanese war effort and the United States during the final stages of World War II. While the I-58 is most infamously remembered for sinking the USS Indianapolis, this singular act is part of a broader narrative in which the submarine played a crucial role in Japan's late war strategy and indirectly shaped post-war geopolitics. The sinking of the Indianapolis was a tactical success, but it also triggered one of the most devastating disasters for the U.S. Navy, resulting in a staggering loss of life and showcasing the desperate yet lethal effectiveness of Japan's final wartime efforts. The strategic role of submarines in Japan's war effort. During World War II, submarines were a vital component of naval warfare, used by both Axis and Allied forces to carry out surprise attacks, disrupt supply lines, and conduct reconnaissance. For Japan, whose resources were limited and whose military ambitions stretched across a vast expanse of the Pacific, submarines were a critical tool. Japan's Imperial Navy adopted an aggressive submarine strategy aimed at undermining the U.S. Navy's dominance in the Pacific. Japan's submarines were more technologically advanced in some ways than their Allied counterparts, with greater range and torpedo capabilities. However, Japan's initial submarine strategy focused less on disrupting supply lines, a key component of Allied submarine doctrine, and more on direct naval combat and intelligence-gathering operations. The I-58, as a member of Japan's I-class submarines, embodied this approach. But as the war turned against Japan, the focus shifted to a more desperate tactic, sinking Allied warships and high-value targets, often using suicide missions like the Kaiten, human torpedo, to maximize destruction. The I-58, a submarine of evolution. By the time I-58 was commissioned in September 1943, the tide of the war had already turned in favor of the Allies. The IJN was on the defensive, suffering heavy losses at the hands of American naval and air forces. Japan's once invincible aircraft carriers had been neutralized, its battleships largely ineffective, and the island-hopping campaign led by the U.S. Marines was closing in on the Japanese mainland. The I-58, an I-boat-class submarine, was initially designed for conventional torpedo warfare. However, it underwent significant modifications in the war's later years to accommodate a new and drastic strategy, the use of Kaiten human torpedoes. These suicide weapons represented a last-ditch effort by the Japanese military to inflict catastrophic damage on the U.S. Navy, even at the cost of their own sailors' lives. The introduction of the Kaiten aboard I-58 made it a unique and formidable threat. The submarine's commander, Captain Makatsura Hashimoto, was an experienced officer tasked with navigating the perilous Pacific waters, now dominated by Allied forces. As Japan's naval resources dwindled, Hashimoto and his crew were tasked with missions that carried significant risk but held the potential for devastating impact. The I-58's sinking of the USS Indianapolis became its defining moment, but this mission was just one chapter in its brief, yet impactful, service. The sinking of the USS Indianapolis, a tragic encounter. On July 30, 1945, I-58 encountered the USS Indianapolis while it was on its return voyage to the Philippines after delivering components of the atomic bombs that would later be dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Indianapolis was a heavy cruiser, and its mission was shrouded in secrecy. The crew had no idea they had just played a pivotal role in ending the war. Despite the end of the war being only weeks away, Japan's submarine fleet remained active. Hashimoto, aboard I-58, seized the opportunity when he spotted the Indianapolis. At around midnight, Hashimoto ordered the launch of 6 torpedoes, 2 of which struck the cruiser. The explosion was catastrophic, and within 12 minutes, the Indianapolis had sunk, marking one of the worst disasters in U.S. naval history. Out of the 1,196 sailors aboard the Indianapolis, approximately 300 went down with the ship. The remaining 900 were left adrift in the Pacific Ocean, facing exposure, dehydration, and shark attacks. Over the course of 4 days, without proper rescue, the majority of the survivors perished. By the time they were discovered, only 316 men were still alive. The scale of the tragedy was magnified by the fact that the U.S. Navy had failed to notice that the ship was missing, leading to a delay in search and rescue efforts. The I-58's torpedoes had not only sunk a warship, they had set in motion a series of events that resulted in one of the largest non-combat losses of life in U.S. naval history. The disaster was a grim testament to the power of submarines in warfare, particularly in the hands of a desperate military like Japan's, willing to take extraordinary measures to inflict damage. Psychological and tactical impact of the sinking. The sinking of the USS Indianapolis was more than just a military loss, it was a psychological blow to the U.S. Navy and the American public. The tragedy exposed weaknesses in the Navy's operational communication and rescue capabilities. The fact that hundreds of sailors had been left to die in the open ocean, without immediate help, led to public outrage and an eventual court-martial for the ship's captain, Charles B. McVay III. Though McVay was later exonerated, the incident stained the Navy's reputation and highlighted the devastating effectiveness of submarine warfare. From Japan's perspective, the sinking was hailed as a significant success at a time when there were few left to celebrate. The I-58 had taken down a major U.S. warship, delivering a blow to an enemy that appeared increasingly invincible. In the final, desperate months of the war, every victory, no matter how isolated, served as a morale booster for the Japanese military, even as defeat loomed on the horizon. The psychological impact on Japan's side, however, was short-lived. While the sinking of the Indianapolis was a tactical victory, it had little bearing on the war's outcome. Within weeks of the event, the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, forcing Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945. The I-58's moment of triumph was drowned out by the overwhelming defeat of the Japanese Empire, and any hope that submarine warfare could alter the course of the war was extinguished. The aftermath and legacy of the I-58. Following Japan's surrender, the I-58 was ordered to cease operations and return to port. The submarine was later scuttled by the U.S. Navy in 1946, a year after the war ended, as part of Operation Road's End, where the Allies disposed of Japanese warships and submarines to prevent their use in any future conflict. In the post-war years, the story of the I-58 and its role in sinking the USS Indianapolis became a topic of extensive historical and naval analysis. The event was memorialized in books, films, and documentaries, not only as a tragedy but also as a testament to the brutal nature of submarine warfare and the desperate tactics employed in the final months of World War II. For the U.S., the sinking of the Indianapolis served as a sobering reminder of the vulnerabilities even the most powerful navy could face in the age of submarine warfare. It also highlighted the importance of improving naval communication, rescue operations, and strategies for dealing with submarine threats. The disaster shaped U.S. naval policy in the post-war years, leading to significant changes in how the Navy managed its fleets, communicated during wartime, and conducted search and rescue missions. On a broader level, the I-58 exemplified the shift in naval warfare during World War II, where stealth and surprise became as valuable as firepower and large fleets. Submarines, particularly those employed by Japan, had the capacity to deliver devastating blows to even the most heavily armed warships. The use of suicide weapons like the Kaiten aboard the I-58 also reflected Japan's increasingly desperate measures as the war dragged on, foreshadowing the rise of asymmetric warfare tactics in future conflicts. Conclusion: the lasting importance of the I-58. The I-58 was not just another submarine in the vast array of naval vessels that fought in World War II. Its sinking of the USS Indianapolis remains one of the most significant naval actions of the war, not because it altered the course of the conflict, but because it underscored the lethal potential of submarine warfare in modern military history. The tragedy that followed the Indianapolis's sinking cemented the I-58's place in history as a vessel that, in its brief moment of success, contributed to one of the most harrowing and tragic episodes of World War II. For Japan, the I-58 represented the closing chapter of its naval ambitions. As one of the last IJN submarines to score a major victory before Japan's surrender, it was a symbol of the country's relentless, and ultimately futile, efforts to stave off defeat. For the U.S. Navy, the loss of the Indianapolis exposed critical weaknesses that would be addressed in the years to come, shaping the development of U.S. naval strategy and operations in the post-war period. In the broader context of World War II history, the I-58's actions serve as a stark reminder of the destructive power of submarines, the tragic consequences of war, and the complex legacy of naval warfare during one of humanity's darkest chapters.